Hey everybody, OperationZ here, and we're continuing the story of Abraham, and we're on part 10 now. So, continuing on, they're back there where they were, talked about previously, between Bethel and Hai, where they are sojourning currently at this point in the story, and everything's happening with, what happened with Hagar and the child that she bare to Abram, or that was conceived, and then there was strife between Hagar and with Sarai. And I don't think it was necessarily so much jealousy. It's just that Hagar despised her because it was her child, but just giving her child to another and so on and so forth, I think played a big part in why she was that way with Sarai. But we continue on in Genesis 16:6. But Abram said unto Sarai, Behold, thy maid is in thy hand. Do to her as it pleaseth thee. And when Sarai dealt hardly with her, she fled from her face. So, continuing here with the story, Abram said, Well, she's your servant, so do to her as is good. And then he said that to her, and Sarai basically, we don't know how they did, but she was heavy upon Hagar. And that's what we know from what it says right here, that she was heavy upon Hagar because Sarai dealt hardly with her, and she fled from her face. So Hagar flees, and she just takes off because of what happened, what transpired between Sarai and with Hagar, and that's where they're at now. So Genesis 16 verse 7 here says this, And the angel of the Lord found her by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain in the way to Shur. So God sends his angel, and he finds her by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain in the way to Shur. So the angel of the Lord comes to Hagar, and we're about to see what goes on and what takes place with what God has for Hagar, the message from the Lord with the messenger that God sent. So Genesis 16:8, and he said, Hagar, Sarai's maid, whence camest thou, and whither wilt thou go? And she said, I flee from the face of my mistress Sarai. So Sarai is explaining here to the angel what happened and what took place. And, this must have been a very interesting thing to happen, that an angel of the Lord just appears onto her and she's talking to an angel. And we don't know exactly how it looked and what all happened. We just know that it's a messenger of the Lord, and that this messenger of the Lord appears to Hagar, Sarai's servant. So we see this just take place, and we see that, God is seeing everything that's going on and everything that's happening here with Hagar, that he's paying attention, so much so that he sent his messenger to go and speak with Hagar. And Genesis 16:9, And the angel of the Lord said unto her, Return to thy mistress, and submit thyself under her hands. So the angel of the Lord saying, don't leave where you were staying at there with Abram and with Sarai and all of them, because, the way she's going, she would have probably ended up dying in the wilderness or throughout somewhere, just going off on her own at this point, and she's pregnant with the child and all these things. And the angel just says, don't do this, but go and submit yourself to your mistress Sarai. So we see that that's what they're told to do. And, we continue throughout the story, but that's what Hagar is told to do by the angel of the Lord. So Genesis 16, verse 10 says this, and the angel of the Lord said unto her, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. So Hagar gets that special promise from the Lord that of Ishmael, or her son, because the name isn't yet mentioned, but of her son, basically his seed also will be a great multitude of people, that his generations and so on and so forth will be a great and powerful nation too, or a nation, so to say. And it shall not be numbered for multitude. So Genesis 16, verse 11, and the angel of the Lord said unto her, behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shalt call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. So see, it's just incredible to see here that God is all-knowing, all-seeing, all-powerful, and God sees everything that we go through. That he's not just watching Abram and Sarai, but he's also taking note of everyone else there too, as well as Hagar. God sees the affliction of Hagar, and God has compassion and mercy towards Hagar's situation here. And he says, you too, it's of Abraham. Basically, you too will be, your son will be a lineage of a great nation, that a great nation that cannot be numbered for multitude will come forth from Hagar also. So God sees her affliction and her struggles, and God blesses her as well as Abram and Sarai, that good will come. And we don't yet see how it takes place and how it unfolds, but we see later on everything that takes place. And the Ishmaelites, this is later on down the road a little bit, jumps ahead, but they are a prosperous people, and they do prosper when it comes to things like trade and with just other things that would take place. But we see that here with Hagar and what takes place between the angel and Hagar, that what God promises for her. So the angel of the Lord said unto her, behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shalt call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. So the name Ishmael means in the Hebrew tongue, God listens, or God hears. God sees everything that goes on and takes place, and basically God is compassionate and loving, and he takes everything into account when it comes to people. He sees people that suffer and go through things, and then just out of nowhere for them, blessings come and goods around the corner for them when they get through that trial or that suffering that they're going through. Because basically, this was just something that took place, and it was Sarai's idea to do that. That way, there could be an heir to what Abram was to pass down from his household to the firstborn son. And we see how it all ends up taking place later on. And we see how God also blesses the descendants of Hagar and the descendants of Ishmael later on down the road. So Genesis 16 verse 12, and he will be a wild man, his hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. So, we see that promise. He is to be a wild man, and all these things that it talks about. And Ishmael, when he does end up leaving later on, he ends up, being a master of the bow, and he ends up, all these things, like he learns to be the user of the bow, and, a great hunter, and things like that. That's just little things that go along with this part of the story here for Ishmael, that, but that's a little bit later on with what happens, not to get too far ahead. But that's the story for right here, and you all have a blessed day.